Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from December 17th, 2021, almost to the end of the 2021 look backs. And I'm recording this on June 17th, 2022. I give you those dates so that you know when this information is actually relevant, because the market's always moving and changing. So what a book's going for this week may not be the same as next week. And if anything, this list really shows you how quickly prices can change. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. This week, we're looking back at 19 different books between those two lists of 10. So there was only one crossover book this week. So we got a lot of books to get to see if we can figure out what factors made them hot, why they did or did not stay hot since, and whether or not it was worth continuing to chase those books. So, without further ado, let's get into this list and see what we can learn. First up, we have God Country number 1. This has been on and off the list a few times. Hit the list this time back in December because a showrunner was announced for the show, which I thought it was going to be a movie, not a TV series, but I guess apparently I was wrong with that. Back then, raw copies jumped up to $60. 9.8 hit 300 plus. Just to give you context, this was first option all the way back in 2018, so it tells you how long these things can take. Now raw copies are 40 to 100, but a 9.8 is only 1 to 200. So I'd originally said this is an I'll be back, and it definitely was, if not a trap, for a 9.8, but raw copies are actually up a little bit. They were actually more of a worth it kind of thing. Overall, I put this as down and I'll be back because of the value and the fact that there's almost as many 9.8 sales as raw copy sales. But yeah, you could argue with me that this should be on the up list for the raws. So definitely a little different. But yeah, we'll see where this goes and when we actually get it. But thinking about it, like I said, original announcement was all the way back in 2018. Took till now to get a showrunner. We'll see how much longer it takes to get this. My guess is it'll continue to come back down, particularly on the raw side probably now. Next, we have Mega Man number 1 from 2003. This is the first kind of Mega Man in American comics, I believe. Rumors of a live action movie on Netflix is what drove this onto the list. It was still only going for $10. This is one of those ones Tom puts on the list. It's kind of marginal. Mostly driven by number of sales. 9.8 did jump all the way up to $225 with this news. Now it's a $5 to $15 book on the raw side, but only the most recent sale, which is just one, was $60 for a 9.8. So yeah, this one definitely dropped way back on the 9.8 size overall, but the vast majority of sales are raw sales. So I just put this as an I'll be back in this case, but still down for sure. Next, we're going to move into our covers. We only have 4 covers this week. We actually got a fairly decent spread of stuff, other than a ton of MCU stuff at the bottom of the list. First cover is Archie's Holiday Magic Special number 1. This Dan Parent variant was limited to 250 copies. Limited Sexy Betty and Veronica covers almost always do well, although particularly the older ones, maybe not as much on the modern stuff, but this one's still doing well. $80 to $90 back then, now $80 to $100. So this has been very steady, very worth it so far if you were chasing this Veronica cover. Next, we have Miles Morales Spider-Man number 33, the Matthias Manhani? I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce the name. 1 in 25 of Miles' new suit, new costume. I didn't think a lot of this costume, but apparently some people seem to like it. Back then, it was going for just double, not even double ratio, at $40 for 1 in 25. So I didn't think much about the potential of this holding or going up. That usually means if it doesn't make double, it's going to end up actually below ratio. That does not happen in this case. It's pretty much stayed right there. $30 to $50 for a raw copy. 9.8 going 75 to 125. So this one's also been pretty steady and pretty worth it so far. So this is 1 in 25 that kind of just sat where it sat unless there was a later spike that I don't remember at this point. So next we have Star Wars: The High Republic annual number from 2021. Star Wars: The High Republic Adventures annual, from 2021. This IDW online exclusive was going for $100 right after release. Now raw copy will cost you $1 to $150. Not any real slab sales yet. Back then I wasn't sure exactly what would happen with this book because I didn't know the print run. I put it as an I'll be back. Still don't actually know the print run, but this one's definitely up and worth it. Almost all the sales are above the $100 mark, all the way up to $150. So this is definitely another up and worth it book. This does have a couple of first appearances in it, which I don't think I realized also back then, that are probably helping to maintain this particular cover for its value. Next, we have a book from last week. This is Star Wars Crimson Reign #1, making the list for the second week in a row. This is Steve Cummings 1 in 50. One weekend was going for 70 to 90, which wasn't even double ratio. By this time, it was up to 125 plus. So between double and triple ratio, still puts it as an I'll be back generally. But in this case, this is actually, now it's only a $10 to $40 for a raw book. 9.8 is only going 150 to 175. This one definitely became a dumpster fire. This crashed way hard. Not a lot of people chasing this book. Definitely one that last week when we talked about it, with those prices, it was a trap. At this prices, it's definitely a dumpster fire. Not a book that you should have chased right out the gate. Next, we have our first Comic Buzz book, and it is Odin's Eye #1, the last of the Bad Idea Final 5. I really wish it would be the last of the Bad Idea books I'd ever have to talk about on these lookbacks. They have not been good investments at any point. This one is no different. Raw copies back then were going for $50 to $70. Now it's a $10 to $20 book. 9.8 is only going for $80, so barely more than what you were paying for raw copies back then. I predicted Trap, and I wasn't harsh enough. This is a dumpster fire. This book, just none of these Bad Idea books held, except for I think the very first one, like that Hero Action or whatever. I think that's the only one that has done well. But at least in this case, you did get a book, and it wasn't like an empty case or something that they were trying to make you pay for. So next, we're going to move on to The Good Asian #1. This hit the list because Fortune magazine named it the best book of 21, which caused a 400% increase in sales, but no real bump in value. So a lot of people were interested, went and got it, but they really weren't chasing it for more because they wanted to read it. Raw copies were up to $4. What? Like I said, cover price. It wasn't more, it was just lots of sales. 9.8 did go for 70. Now it's still a $5 to $10, a cover to $10 book. It's still right in that same range. 9.8 is going for 40 to 100. So this one's been very steady, but it's an I'll be back. You can still get it for basically cover price. Wouldn't chase this book very hard. You just find it when you can find it. But I did hear this was an excellent read. So it's on my list to maybe add to the stack for the indie show. We'll see. Excuse me. Next we have Strange Tales #126. First appearance of Dormammu and Clea. Hit the list because Clea had become the new Sorcerer Supreme back then after the death of Doctor Strange. So this had to do with the comics and not what happened here a couple months ago in the movie. Interestingly enough, so occasionally Tom and Russ do this where they'll put the average raw sale is like $1,100. There's no way that was the average. That had to be like a high, or they're saying the average of very high grade books, because the 7.0 was only going for 900. Based on that, this would be an absolute dumpster fire, because raw sales now are basically 100 to 700. I think there was one raw sale that was pushing 1,000, but everything else was 1 to 700 depending on condition. Even high grade stuff was 700. 7.0s, on the other hand, only dropped 800. But you're saying the average sale was 1,100 back then? Something seems wrong about that. I just put it as a down and an I'll be back based on all the graded sales. That's basically what they were. That $100 decline. They got a secondary bump, obviously, because of Multiverse of Madness. But yeah, I don't know where they got that average sale of $1,100 for a raw copy. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't match with what data I can find. Next, we have Ultimate Comics Spider-Man #5. The origin of Miles' suit and officially becomes Spider-Man was the spec back then. Back then, raw copies of this were going for 100 plus. Basically, what happens in this book is Nick Fury gives him a suit so that he can differentiate himself from Peter, so people don't think he's a different Spider-Man, but a different Spider-Man. And his friend says, well, that must mean you're Spider-Man for real, because Nick Fury acknowledged him. So that's what they're going off of, calling him. This is when he officially becomes Spider-Man. For some reason, and I have no idea, I didn't get a chance to go back and look at the video. I've written down that I said straight cast. That was dumb. I don't know why I would have said that. I am not very smart. But now it's a $20 to $100 book raw. Turned into a trap. It's most of the sales around that $30, $40 mark. And actually marginally a dumpster fire at that point. But yeah, but there are still sales 60, 70, 80, so that's why I didn't call it that. But yeah, most of the sales are under 60 though. But yeah, definitely a trap. And one time I talked myself into something apparently that doesn't make sense to me now for sure. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 10, first appearance of Spider-Punk. This basically hit the list because of solicitations that we were getting a Spider-Punk series. Back then, raw copies were going for $30 to $40. Now raw copies are $30 to $60. 9.8 will cost you $275, $400. Back then I said worth it. It seems to be a pretty popular character. I think the other reason this is on there is people are specking that we're going to get Spider-Punk in the next animated movie, in the next Spider-Verse movie. But yeah, so far this has been up and worth it. Slightly, you could argue steady, but there's enough sales in the 50-60 range, let's call it up, compared to what it was back then. So yeah, definitely been worth it. We'll see if we ever get Spider-Punk or how long this holds on. All right, we got what, 2, 4, oh gosh, we got seven more books. 2, 4, 6, 8 more books, and they're all MCU rumor related. First up, we have Avengers number 268. So you can see my comment at the bottom. So basically, there was a connection to Kang and the Watch and Hawkeye before we actually knew what the Watch and the Hawkeye for sure was. So there was a huge increase in sales of people chasing this book, even though it was still only going for $3. A 9.8, though, some person paid $190 for. It's still a $3 to $6 book, so I guess you can call it steady on that side. The one 9.8 sale recently went for $50. That's definitely way down, but why people were chasing off this Easter egg thing that didn't make a lot of sense to me and still doesn't. Next, we have Warlock and the Infinity Watch number 2, first appearance of the Infinity Watch. Basically, this was hot because Key Collector mentioned that this is where the team actually forms, and maybe we'll get that team in the future. So they put it on the list, even though it was going for $3. 9.8 jumped all the way up to 200. I feel sorry for that person. Raw copies now are 3 to 10, because once it's been mentioned once, you can usually get sales all the way up to 10. That's just the way it works. But yeah, definitely an I'll be back. There was no reason to chase this book. Still not. All right, next, we got a little oddball. We have the Daily Bugle No Way Home newspaper. Basically, this was a promotional newspaper given away in New York only at pop-up newsstands around New York City to hype up the No Way Home release. Back then, raw copies of this were going for 150 plus. Generally speaking, these kind of movie event release things don't hold very well. I put it only as an I'll be back because I thought, being Spider-Man, it might hold a little better if the movie hits. The movie did hit, but it still hasn't held all that well. 50 to 115. Definitely turned into a trap. Definitely way down. There was no reason to really chase this, and I'm not sure who really collects this kind of thing, but I'm sure there are people. So next, we're moving into, at this point, the trailer for Doctor Strange had dropped, so we got some Doctor Strange hype, not related to Clea, but related to other characters. And this is Vengeance number 1, the first appearance of America Chavez. We caught a glimpse of her in the trailer. It caused 9.6s to jump up to 650 to 700. Now this book is a 9.6 is 350 to 400, so it's half. Raw copies are 80 to 200, 9.8, 750 to 900. I said straight cast, thinking only a month or so after Doctor Strange, it would probably still be holding pretty well, that we might get a higher peak. It's not happened this year with the downturn, and what we've been seeing with some of these other trailers is the books aren't actually jumping as well as they did. So the peak was really this trailer and not the release of the movie. And so it's been kind of steadily down since then. And really further down now that the movie's come and gone, this definitely turned into a trap. We're going to get her again as a character, so that may cause it to bounce back. But at this point, it's a trap if you were paying those initial we saw her prices. Next, we have Marvel Now .1 from 2012. So this is the first appearance of America Chavez on the cover. This is not to be confused with the Kamala Khan Marvel Now, all new Marvel Now .1. This is just Marvel Now. So we dropped the all new. Back then, raw copies of this were going for 20 and 9.8 at 300. No recent 9.8 sales, but this is a $5 to $15 book. Another I'll Be Back. Another book that's down despite the movie coming and going. This book did not sustain the rush back there when we first saw her. Next, we have What If, number 18. This is the first appearance of a sort of evil Doctor Strange version. But basically, we got that in the trailer. So that made people think, oh, maybe we're getting this kind of evil Doctor Strange. And we did get an evil version of Doctor Strange in the movie, but back then this jumped up to $25 for a raw copy. 9.8 was going for $140. Now it's a $2 to $20 book. Another trap. Nobody's really got any interest into this. And it's not really the same kind of version, so it's definitely a little different. All right, what we got left? 2 more books. First up, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 50, first appearance of Kingpin. And back then, again, another one of these, sometimes they do this with bigger books. They're claiming a raw copy average sale of $3,700. 7.5 going for $4,100. If that's the case on the raw copies, then this book is crashed and burned and people hate the Kingpin now or something. I put this was a straight guess because it's first appearance of Kingpin, but this book has definitely dropped back considerably. A raw copy will only cost you $350 to $1,000 right now. Now, mind you, maybe they're talking again about high grades, but they said average. Some of the higher grade stuff will cost you beyond $1,000, but for the most part, you're looking at $350 to $1,000 for a raw copy of this. A 7.5 is going to cost you $2 to $25, so about half what it was back then when we got Kingpin in the Hawkeye show again, that he was coming back to the MCU. The market has turned down, and even for some of these bigger books, the market has turned down this spring, and moving away from the hype related to the show is not sustained. This is a really good book that's down quite a bit, and I would guess if you want a copy of this book, now might be the best time you're ever going to get with it being down like this in a slow market, if you can find a way to finagle a copy, because long term this book is definitely going to go back up. All right, last book of the week is Daredevil 131, first appearance of Bullseye. Basically, with confirmation of Matt Murdock, confirmation of the Kingpin being part of the MCU, people were jumping on, well, who else could they bring back, so that they might bring back a version of bring Bullseye back in when they do a Daredevil show or movie. Raw copies $325, 9.6 at $2,300. Now raw copies is $150 to $400, so but definitely down a little bit. 9.6, $15 to $2,300, also down. But this one's held a little better than the others, particularly better than that Kingpin book, but definitely an I'll Be Back overall. So that is this week's list. We had 19 books, a ton of books dropped again. We had a few more. We had several books, though, that were kind of worth it. It stayed kind of increased a little bit. But yeah, overall, just down, which is the state of the comic market right now. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.